Welcome everyone, Costini here with a discussion about difficulty in Total War Warhammer 3, or about difficulty in general. This particular campaign is on legendary difficulty with very hard battle difficulty. Playing as Cafe, Miao Ying, turn 14, defending the Great Bastion while also dealing with rebels. And what I want to talk about here is how the difficulty in Total War is just broken. How the difficulty settings are just broken, and how overall Creative Assembly's handling of not just difficulty but certain core gameplay mechanics, especially in battles, but not just that, are a huge detriment to the enjoyment of the game. Because the way difficulty is handled in Total War is that it's either too easy and grinding, or it's very hard and grindy. And there is difficulty in finding a middle ground. Either you're gonna wipe the floor with all the enemies that stand before you, especially happens on lower difficulties, or you're going to face very difficult battles that you pretty much need to win all of them one by one, or you're going to lose a campaign. This tends to happen on Legendary, but not throughout Legendary, only really in the early game. So for instance, over here I'm playing as Cafe. My starting position is actually pretty bad. So the Snake Gate here starts destroying. Now, right now it's intact, it's level 2, I've spent some money. But the AI was, but I do have an AI partner that starts with the Dragon Gate and the Turtle Gate. They've lost them. On top of that, there's a Siege faction here in the graveyard, the Terracotta Graveyard. That presents a substantial threat, as they do have a fairly solid garrison there in the graveyard. Then you also have two rebellions, one in the Gunpowder Road province centered around Nanli, and then another one to the south in the Warpstone desert. And then you have greenskins and all that kind of stuff, and Skaven, etc. To deal with. So it's a pretty harsh starting position. And turn 14 here, I have two situations. I have several Norscan armies, mainly Chaos Marauders, but also some Chaos Warriors units. So there's two factions, two different factions actually over here. You can tell by these symbols. So these guys are the Dreaded Woe, and these guys are Kazakh. And these guys will attack the Great Bastion. On top of that, you do have the infinite spawns of the Kurgan warbands. And that's exactly what I'm dealing with. Infinite numbers of armies, and then you have Siege. So it's a really harsh position. But here's the thing. This is not... everything that's happening here, not really hard at all. What I'm struggling with right now is this particular situation, because I have a full stack of troops here. I have another one in Nanli, and then the Center Lord faction might also have another or two other armies that they could send into the fray. So here's the problem with the way difficulty works in Total War Warhammer. On a campaign level, the AI gets a better auto-resolve, significant economic growth, public order benefits, to the point that rebellions are a non-issue. For the most part, for them. At least certain factions have a non-issue in terms of rebellions, though they have certainly scaled things down compared to how things have been before in previous games. Because like in Warhammer 2 in particular, rebellions, public order used to be a thing that I didn't care about. So right now they do actually have to care about it to a large degree, but you as the player, and they also get significant public order bonuses on that, but not as significant as Warhammer, so they get quite a lot of bonuses. And on top of that, they get free levels for their heroes, they get experience on that. It has been significantly toned down from Warhammer 2, but it is still a problem. And you combine all of that, and you get into an unbearable situation, especially early game. But here's the problem with it. It is unbearable early game, where you have fight after fight, stack after stack that you have to defeat, and every minor faction will be able to field at least one full stack, 1.5 full stacks of pretty decent troops. Like these guys, these Center Lords, they're fielding a one full stack here of Jade Warriors and Jade Warrior Crossbowmen, and they likely have at least one other army that they're holding near their capital. By the way, this faction, the Central Lords, is not supposed to be Miao Ying's problem. It's supposed to be her brother's problem, but yeah, they've gotten out of control. So the early game is a nightmare to play on a high difficulty. Not so much on a low difficulty, but what is the case for both lower and higher difficulties is once you get past the early game, you will become not quite unstoppable. You can still make mistakes, screw it up, but you will not lose the campaign. Here, I'd say if you can get past about turn 30, 40 in a pretty solid position, you've pretty much won the campaign. Everything else is just a grind, but you will not be stopped. Everything else is just dealing with the souls, conquering territory, and all that kind of stuff, and dealing with that. Now, you can lose a campaign. You can pretty much lose a campaign that time, even if you do have a decent amount of territory, because you are getting swarmed by enemies, and you might just decide, yeah, it's not worth trying to salvage it. That happened in my Boris Ursus campaign on Legendary, where I wasn't doing badly, but I had certainly made a series of poor decisions, and I wasn't necessarily going to lose, but winning from that, crawling out of that, was going to be difficult. I did have a powerful army in that situation, and I did have decent territory and a decent economy, but it's just like, it is annoying to deal with that. So one of the problems and difficulty in Total War is if you're winning, you will keep winning. And this, by the way, applies to what happens to AI. If you lose, you will keep losing. That's kind of the issue. There's no middle ground. There's no way really to recover. Sure, you can build another army, but then it's like the enemy's just going to send more and more armies, and you might win every battle after that, but it's just going to be a frustrating grind to deal with it. I certainly don't know how someone like Legend of Total War can handle all those disaster battles and disaster campaigns, for instance, specifically, that he's been doing. And I don't think it's a good system of difficulty to have an inverted difficulty curve where the early game is significantly more difficult, because all the benefits the AI has, the significant amount of cash the AI has, that plays a role early on, especially because, and extra recruitment slots. That's an enormous benefit for the AI early on, because it means they can field armies significantly faster than you. So you might win every battle, but then the AI will just show up with the full stack anyway, even if you've crushed them up until that point. Like, for instance, even if I kill this army of Siege right here, his capital is around here. Even if I did that, by the time I actually managed to get there, let's say I had an army at Snake Gate, I marched there, by the time I would reach his capital, he would probably have a full stack or close to a full stack already of troops waiting for me. It is ridiculous, whereas you can only recruit 2 units at the time. Let's say 5 if you're using global recruitment, but that is obviously slower than regular recruitment. So you certainly wouldn't be able to recruit an army of this size. And by the way, believe it or not, despite how bad things might look, everything that's happening here in the West, minus Kairos potentially intervening and assaulting the Dragon Gate, everything here, despite the large number of troops, this is easy. That's the thing. This is, you end up in a situation where you face four armies, not 6 armies actually. There's 6 armies here, not full armies. I'd say about 4 stacks of troops, 3.5, let's say, 3.5 stacks of troops. You face that, and it's like, oh, this is going to be easy to deal with because they're attacking Walled Settlement. They can't bypass it unless they get through it. So that's a cakewalk, right? What's not cakewalk is this situation, because I have a full army here in Natalie, then I have another stack of troops, enemy troops to deal with. How do I win that? And how do you win these kind of situations? For instance, there's a Siege faction here. I said that there's a graveyard. Well, one of the things you can do is you bait the enemy to attack an army. So what you do is you recruit a lord, for instance. If you're trying to bait them out, you recruit a lord, you send them a bit ahead, away from the settlement, so they're not in the radius of the settlement. You then send your main army behind them, but out of range of the enemy, and then you put them in ambush stance. The enemy will see, the AI will see that lord, because they have vision. They'll see that lord, that's like, oh, that's an easy prey target, let's do it. Because AI is scripted to attack where you are weak. You bait them, you annihilate the army, then you take the graveyard. And you can do it in other cases as well, other situations as well. It's a really good tactic, but it's absolute cheese. And the problem, I feel, is you absolutely have to rely on cheese to do it. Now, what about lower difficulties? What's the problem with lower difficulties? Well, you don't have the early game challenges. Sure, you don't have it as frustrating in the early game, but then you just steamroll up everything. And believe it or not, just waltzing up to enemy, auto-resolving, winning every battle with auto-resolve is not a fun experience. I did a campaign on lower difficulty, and I don't think I had to fight a single battle except the ones I chose to for the sake of cinematic purposes. It was my Kislev campaign as Catherine, where I was recording all the cinematics to post on YouTube. I didn't have to fight a single battle manually there in that entire campaign. Just an idea. And that's completely broken as well, because it's boring as dirt to do it. So you either have things boring as dirt, you either have things hard as nails, and you have to use a bunch of cheese to win, and it's a grind regardless, with a lot of bullshit tactics required to win. Now, how could they fix that? Well, I think one of the problems is the AI gets significant bonuses from the very start. So one of the things I personally do is remove those bonuses at the start, or have those bonuses being given to the AI gradually. So that means the AI becomes more powerful as you play. On top of that, minor factions should not get as many benefits as the major factions. Though what counts as a minor and major faction, that's a different discussion. Like, I feel Altdorf in this game should be the most powerful Imperial faction, because they are. So for instance, that should be a factor. Like, they should get they should get certain benefits to make them the powerhouse they are. They shouldn't compare, like a minor faction shouldn't compare in any way in strength to them. So I think that's a factor that Creative Assembly should look at. Like, minor factions should be minor factions like these kind of rebels should be insignificant. Clan Eshin should not be a rebellion, for instance. That's another discussion. Those are the kind of things I feel they should look at. That's one of the aspects they should do. What about battles? Well, battles are bullshit in their own way. This is very hard. And I'm going to be able to win this very easily. Okay, so in terms of battles, if this was on an open field against this army, what I would do is just corner camp, set my ass in a corner, form a checker box formation or square, whatever. Not the square, just a couple of rows of units, wait for an enemy to come towards me, annihilate them as they come. Maybe even slow them down with certain abilities, all that. It's a very effective way of winning battles. It's also not really fun. The battles are incredibly stupid and simplistic because of the most efficient way to win those battles is to use those kind of stupid and simplistic tactics. That's not fun. Like, Total War battles used to be a lot more dynamic. The way battles in Warhammer have been for a while now reminds me of Third Age Total War playing as the fucking elves, and that was not a fun experience, playing as the elves just sitting in a corner annihilating the enemy from distance. But that's exactly what Total War has come into. Like, yeah, I love Third Age Total War, but the way they handled difficulty was plainly awful. And yet, it's basically, it's an interesting situation to think of the fact that what Total War has transformed into as a main series is it's adopted many of the bullshit difficulty mechanics of that particular game. Or that particular...
Rooting out evil. Triviality.
Alright, so what I'm doing here, they have units. I'm just going to transform her into a dragon, move my units towards them, and I'm going to take down the towers with me. I mean, flying units are great, flying heroes rather, are great for two reasons. Number one, they can make the enemy waste a significant portion of their ammunition, which, as you might imagine, is a significant benefit when you're playing on this kind of difficulty. So that's a Celestial Dragon Guard unit. That's a really powerful unit. And they're probably gonna get slaughtered without really doing any real damage against my units. I'm just gonna call in the ancestral warriors there to deal with their ranged units. Now this is a spell that you get when you have a harmonious balance between in your faction as Cafe.
Minds as one. The storm dragon.
So they're building another tower. Now, what I'm doing here is just using the situation in terms of the settlement's terrain to my advantage. So what the settlement has is like, every settlement has certain capture points, right? That give you supplies. And also they're attached to those capture points are certain towers and barricades. You take the capture point, you get control of, you remove the enemy's towers if you're on the attack.
The storm gathers.
So in this case, I'm just using Miao Ying to snipe the towers, while using my archers standing outside to just bombard the crap out of the enemy units, while not taking any significant losses in return. I'm gonna lose some men, sure, but I'm gonna lose very, very few men in comparison to what the AI is going to lose. That tower is gonna go up. Tower is gone. Pull back Miao Ying. And just wait. And now we just wait. Simple as that. Pulling back this one unit. I have significantly more range than they have. I'm actually surprised by the AI that they recruited a bunch of peasants with long spears. Because if they had recruited the proper army, then yeah, the situation would be markedly different here. So I'm just gonna keep going. I can also heal Miao Ying, by the way. And I think I'll actually do just that. Because she's taking a bit of damage there. While sending my infantry units there to take those positions. Now, once my infantry has taken those positions, it's going to be a much freer ride, because I'm not going to have to worry too much about the remnants of their towers. And I'll just move my units closer. And then pull these guys back, Lion Terror. And now I just wait. That's it. That's the battle, in a nutshell. Even if I don't win right here, that's no problem. As long as I limit my casualties, I'll be just fine. And I'm just gonna heal her in the meantime. They still have some units, of course. And there you go. That's how you win a battle, minimal casualties in this. And I could have done that better. On lower difficulty, I would have lost less than 100 men. But even so, this is pretty significant victory. The only real cost is that Miao Ying did get some significant damage done on her, but outside that, it's all good. All because the AI has... All because you can't really fix a broken AI system with just giving them significant bonuses. Therein lies the fundamental issue here.
It has the honor of joining Cathay.
And there we go. Now I will have obvious issues here as a result of this particular battle, but the issue is going to be let's Corolla bleaching. There are going to be some problems, of course, but for the most part, I will be quite fine. Just gonna give it to her. And you just do this over and over and over again, using cheap tactics like that. if this army attacks, for instance, look at these guys. What I do is just fly her overhead, make them waste their ammunition trying to target her, win the day. And that's all I need to do in order to be able to win. And it is a really cheap effort that it would require. I'm gonna upgrade that specific game. And that's frustrating. You just have to use cheap, boring tactics. It's boring doing this. It's not fun. That's the thing. Yeah, I win, and I win easily, but it is just boring, 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 boring tactics over and over and over and over again, without any real challenge being thrown in against you as a player. Therein lies my issue with all of this. I'll take the in cost. Therein lies the substantial issue that I have with all of this. That is just dull as dirt, having to rely on these kind of tactics. But the game they've built, the way they've built it, the strength of missile units, the significant benefits the AI gets in melee on Legendary as well, because that's one of the reasons you don't want to fight in melee on Legendary or very hard battle difficulty. The AI gets enormous morale bonus, leadership bonuses, as well as significant melee bonuses. Now again, this is not as bad as Warhammer 2. It's worse than Warhammer 2 in every way that I'm talking about here. This is actually significantly better than that. But here's the problem. If I'm playing on lower difficulty, then I'm not having any fun, because why would I fight any battle? Like, yeah, sure, the auto-resolve is really broken in Warhammer 3, but it's still better in many ways than wasting minutes of your life just doing a battle you know you're going to win without effort. Actually, that's frustrating with having a broken auto-resolve system, that you have to fight on this kind of difficulty a bunch of battles you know for certain you're going to win. So yeah, I knew for certain I was going to win easily in that specific scenario. Right? So I was not going to be concerned by that. But I had to be concerned by that because obviously I have a stack of troops here. But if I was on a lower difficulty, I would not care at all. Actually, if I was on a lower difficulty, I would have wiped out the Dissenter Lords by now myself, marched on siege, burned his house to the ground, all of that within all of these turns. I'm probably exaggerating to some degree, but I have 2 stacks of troops. I would have conquered all of this within a couple of turns, all of this. Instead, it's taken me 14 turns. It slows you down. That's what it does. It slows you down, and you can't allow it to slow down, but it will slow you down to some degree or another. And it just leads to frustration, grind, and boredom. And that's where I stand on Total War difficulty. What I think they need to do is they need to change the way these benefits are handled, and they need to change some of the fundamental aspects of the game. Why do we need to start as a player in a crap position? Because we've never liked it when Creative Assembly gave us a large empire. Look at Free Kingdoms and some of the DLCs there, and the problems that those caused, absolutely, for players to get a grip on that. But it's just not good. Like, they need to go to the drawing board and start thinking about the way to improve it. You know, here's the shocking aspect. Medieval 2 and Rome 1, which are so old and have a lot of problems in their own right, but they were better than this in many ways. Because the AI did not have such nonsense benefits, even on the highest difficulties. Yes, they had benefits, but not on this nonsensical level. Now, of course, those games could go differently in the other direction, where many AI factions just would not produce troops. Obviously, you do want them to produce troops. You do want them to have some kind of empire. Sure, you don't want the game to just be one boring movement after another, taking settlement after settlement in easy affairs. You want the AI to present a challenge. And that was one of the issues in Medieval 2, one of the significant issues in Medieval 2 and Rome 1. So you don't want that either, but it was better, the pacing of it. There, like the fact that you didn't have replenishment, for instance, and you actually had to worry about replenishing your troops manually. The fact you didn't just start with a single settlement with the, in a way, generic, with the same, with everyone starting with a small army and just like getting a hero or starting with a hero and all that. Like, because everyone starts like that. There's no spice in it. There's no flavor. I mean, the starting position obviously changes a lot of things. The challenges do change, but everyone starts in a single settlement in this game. And I think that also needs to change. That's also a factor that should likely be changed in this game in the future. Anyway, Costin here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.